It is often said that great leaders have a knack for bringing out the best in those that follow. In turn, followers enjoy the work they do and will take the initiative to soar far above and beyond what is asked of them. A scientific leader guide and inspire by influencing knowledge with their thinking and ideas. You can find them creating new technologies, doing research and writing, teaching, and the like. Their ideas tend to be well thought through, supported by data and analysis, and of course, logical. These people develop structure and frameworks that help others solve problems. I'm sure you all might have witnessed such leadership behind the vaccines for COVID 19, which everyone on this planet is waiting for. This is your host, Swami Sri Perambador, and you are listening to Leadership in Crisis. And we have invited a scientific leader, more popularly known as, personally, I call him as mad scientist, Dr. John Cohn from IBM. Dr. John is famous for his contributions to microchip design used in everything from supercomputers to the loving gaming gadgets like Xbox 360, PlayStation, and the Wii, and many more. Dr. John Cohn is an IBM fellow in the MIT IBM Watson AI Research Group based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. John earned a bachelor degree from MIT and PhD in computer engineering from Carnegie Mellon University, where he was named a distinguished alumni in 2014. John has authored more than 40 technical papers, contributed to 4 books, and has more than 120 worldwide patents. In 2005, John was elected a fellow of the IEEE for contributions to high speed integrated circuit design. John is an active in education issues at local, state, and national level. In 2019, John was awarded the IEEE CAS John Coma Education Award for his efforts at STEM promotion. He's so passionate about promoting STEM careers that he spent 59 days living and inventing in an abandoned steel mill as part of Discovery Channel's technical survival show, The Colony. John lives with his family in a restored 19th century schoolhouse in Jonesville, Vermont, and he is eager to share his love of science and technology with anyone who will listen. John, welcome to Leadership in Crisis.
Thank you so much, Swami. It's very interesting. It's certainly a crisis-laden moment, and I'm really happy to be talking to you about this.
Thank you. So I think I'm very happy to have you as a guest in my podcast and sharing your views to the global listeners. This is a very positive moment for all of us starting 2021. Just to level set, I know you are a mad scientist to me and many more. So, what is this scientific leadership and why is it important for a leader from your perspective?
Well, I think it couldn't be a better moment. And I would like, a lot of people call me a mad scientist. I think it's because of the way I look. I like to think of myself also as a mad engineer. We need to come up with that archetype because as my PhD advisor used to say, what is an engineer? A scientist with a job. So, as you mentioned, the COVID vaccines, we're at unprecedented is the word of the time. Everything is so unprecedented, right? And to have a global pandemic that has, our only hope is really the help of science and scientists and men and women who are going to go out and study, how do we keep populace safe? How do we cure the people who are ill? How do we, get ahead of this virus? And I can't think of a time, maybe the last time that science was so framed in such a way was like, the beginning of the space race, where everyone is focused on the promise and the necessity of science and the truth of science. Well, I would like to say that I wish everyone were focused on the truth of science. And it's been, part of the crisis. It's one part of the crisis is the actual threat of the disease that, in a better time, let's make it a better time, but in other times might have brought everyone together around the same issue. But what's been very surprising to me and of great concern, I think, to anyone who is doing science is that it's become science and politics have been sort of mixed together in a way, and where the sort of supremacy of science has kind of fallen a little bit, certainly in public discourse. And I think it, there's always great opportunity in these kind of crises. But I think with the vaccines coming through in just such amazingly quick times, and all in parallel, people, like my group at MIT, we're working to help people at MIT who are using cryo-EM microscopy to work on these viruses, to see how everybody stopped everything and started working in that same direction. Incredibly inspiring. And it's the same thing to see that the need to get science literacy, science appreciation, scientific discourse at every level. It can't just be scientists who are talking about science. It has to pervade everywhere. So there's a great challenge to that, but there's a great opportunity. And this crisis, I think, is going to, I tend to be quite an optimist, and I believe that these vaccines are going to show that when we all pull together as a planet to solve a problem, there's nothing we can't do. And I'm hoping that's the way that history will record this. But there's no better time in my mind to be a scientist. This is a place where all eyes are upon us. Thank you
Absolutely.
for bringing that message. Yeah.
No, I think you're right on it, because this is a fantastic time where the positive side of the COVID is the science within is bringing out on everybody. And as you rightly said, many industries also have transformed. When the ventilators were less, I think I heard some of the companies have transformed their manufacturing plants. Whatever they are doing, they stopped and they started manufacturing these ventilators to support for a greater cause. So I completely agree with you. The way how each one has to come up, and it need not be only a scientist working on it, but every person has to have a scientific mindset. And that is where the leaders have to be more with a scientific mindset and be innovative.
And Swami, I think you're right. I think that everyone has a sort of mind of the scientist, that she or he creates something new and is creative. I think what is coming, becoming more visible to the general population are the other aspects of science. Not just the sort of cartoon that with the light bulb over the head, but rigor. The importance of testing.
Mhm.
The um, I have to say it, skepticism. A good scientist is always prepared to change his or her mind, right? You
Yep.
can't be dogmatic. You have to be able to be fact driven. And I think that is a really important lesson. And I think the idea of even sort of the resilience, because science involves trial and error, failure. We think about, we're showing how science needs to go through a process to actually be trustworthy. And I think those kind of meta topics, are much deeper kind of conversation about what science is really about than just the idea that you walk into a laboratory, you come out with a glowing test tube and everything's okay. And I'm hoping that people around the world, especially kids around the world, are coming away inspired by that the scientists are really frontline heroes, and that whether they want to be scientists or they just want to, talk to us more at parties, any of that would be good. But I think it's such an interesting showcase. And to your last point, your point about how, if you had, just sort of speculated, if this hadn't happened and you had said, do you think that industry around the world would be able to retool in a matter of weeks? Do you think that education systems would be able to innovate so that they could work at home, or enterprises? All of that stuff, that the possibility of innovating on the fly when there's a necessity to do that so quickly, and kind of, it may have felt a little rough, but relatively seamlessly,
Yeah.
that is all, kind of a result of the innovative thinking behind science. And it's just really, really inspiring when we look back on it.
No, I think you touched a very nice point on how quickly the companies have changed, because in my mind, some of these rural areas or developing countries, or even in US in the rural areas, before this COVID, if you would have said, okay, I want to work from my village where the internet is weak, first of all, nobody would have been agreed for you to work remotely. But now everybody is saying, okay, think out of the box. How can you really start working? Because one of my employee back in India, he is in a completely in a remote village. He doesn't have an internet at all. And he started working and we supporting a customer. And the out of the box thinking, as you were talking about the kids and the play, he's very young and young person, just fresh out of the college, but the mind is so sharp. He went onto his roof because the signals were better, so he was sitting every day on his roof of house
I
and
love that
working for
picture.
the customer, and customer is delighted. So I have to make him as an employee of the month.
I think this is really interesting. This point of playfulness is that there's a certain, you and I had talked a little bit before. I think that this element of play is so important in times like these. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Yeah,
But
exactly. So, in fact, I was going to ask that, because you and I, in recent discussions, we had a lot of discussions. And one of the discussion you said, the harder the life gets, the more we have to work at staying playful. And how do you see this play in this current pandemic and unprecedented times? I definitely love to hear about it because you're always cheerful, you're always playful, but then you always transform these complex problems into this. So, yeah, please share that to our listeners.
it's interesting hearing you say that. As I would like to say that I'm always cheerful. I don't know if I'm always cheerful. I'm certainly always playful, but I think that this intrinsic play, I love the way you were talking about your employee there. And, you said he's sort of fresh out of college. It's something that there's a process in life that, if we're not careful, causes us to forget how to play. When you have a baby or a puppy, the baby, she or he is, learns through playing. That's how you explore the world. That's how you make sense. And when you think about yourself as a kid playing, I'm not talking about the sort of play as in work-life balance, like I haven't. I hear that's good. I've never tried it, but the idea of it's not something that as a child is moving through the world. Most often, the kid is learning through playing, doing experiments all the time. Push the cereal off of the desk and see what happens. See if I can, get I can get my way. But I think that when we're playing as young kids, we are very much in the moment. We're kind of in a flow. We're not so worried about what's going to happen next. We're not worried about, well, who might be stealing our ideas or whose ideas we're stealing. We're not really thinking so much about the outcome. Maybe you want your team to win or something like that. And then somehow, as we age, we get more and more, kind of in our heads, and it's more about, if I don't get this, this report done, then I won't get that proposal out, and we won't get that business, and I won't get the promotion, and I won't be able to get married to this person, and we wind ourselves up. And pretty soon we end up, kind of taking that passion. I'm as an engineer or scientist, it generally is passion that puts you into it. Something about working with your hands or working with your mind. But what will happen, I see it so much in my colleagues and people that I've met, that if you're not careful, the pressure of the world, of all of those outcomes, all of those external things that are not right now at the moment, will take you out of the moment, and you become work without play just becomes work. And that is such a dangerous thing, because as I believe that, that sort of playful passion is absolutely necessary to innovation. And especially in these crazy times, like we were talking about, I gotta use the word unprecedented times, when you're faced with, uh, you know, a, a discontinuity, a disruption like we are right now in the world, you can't predict the future. So the only thing you could do is kind of, make the leap, kind of go, jump across the chasm and be sort of loose. If you're burdened by fear or burdened by thinking about all the things that could go wrong, you're paralyzed. And it's never very good to just kind of be paralyzed and let the world go beyond you. It's much better to be able to just sort of move forward with kind of an open heart, with a kind of exploratory, with a generally playful, we'll handle whatever comes. That's not to say, by the way, and that's why when you said always cheerful, it's not that it always works out and that if you have a good attitude, you'll always be happy. Life can throw some really tough things at us, as we see, right?
Yep.
But your ability to react in a playful spirit, in an experimental spirit, in a resilience, the resilience that a play gives you resilience, your ability to sort of, if that doesn't work, you can kind of brush yourself off and say, that was interesting. What's next? Right. So I think that actually it's called for it, as you say, in some of the hardest times. As I know you've heard me speak before, even when life has tragedy, like when our middle son passed away in
Yep.
2006, I found, and I know that's a hard thing to hear, but
Mhm.
I found that the more that I sort of played, to me, playing is sharing my love of love and of science and with other people, mostly with kids.
Yep.
And I found that the more that I did that, the more excited I got and the more back in the world I got. And if I kind of look back and think, oh my gosh, that got me through one of the worst things you can imagine. I've seen it time and time again, and I've seen it in my colleagues, that if you keep that spirit,
Mhm.
you can take anything that comes at you. So it's something we need a lot more of that in the world, and we need a lot less worry. And that's not to say it's not serious. It's to say you're never well served by sitting in fear.
True, true. I think you brought up quite a big different points, which I have now a lot of questions to ask you.
Oh,
One, first of all, I know how you have taken the deepest sorrow of missing or not having Sam. It's not easy to take, but you took that because there is no other way. But you took it in a positive approach and gave the Sam Stone, and it is still with me. Thank you for giving me and sharing that. And I know the Sam Stones are everywhere across the globe, even in the satellite, I believe. So thanks for showing that love. And one other thing you mentioned is about, be like a kid and play. And of course, it is very difficult to play and not to expect the outcome, because most of the business people say, hey, no, what happens? What is my proposal if I don't get it? So how do I motivate somebody to be playful, not to go into that trauma of, okay, focusing on the outcome and then get drowned in the thoughts and not performing? So what are the things someone should adopt to be more playful, more curious?
well, let me think about it from a leadership standpoint. That if one thing I hear in what you're asking is that if the message is to tell everyone, as employees, or whether you're a student or working in an industry, don't worry, just go play, then
Yep.
you never get anything done. I'm not saying that, by the way, but what I am saying is that you need to have that sort of maintain that playful passion around your work. But I think from a leadership perspective, let me give it from two perspectives. Okay, I think
Okay.
from an employee perspective, or the worker perspective, what I think you have to do is you have to put that sort of self-regulating idea in your mind and in your life, that you're going to, when you find that you're getting to a point where you no longer have passion about the work, and for me that's passion around the technology and science around the work. When I do that, I need to kind of have a little watchdog wake up in my mind and say, okay, you need to go misbehave a little bit. And I think instead of saying just goof off entirely, which is not the message, that you need to sort of self-regulate and make sure that you retain enough time to actually go and explore and have those creative pursuits, those fun pursuits that don't necessarily have a fixed outcome. And what I'm saying is that, in our worlds, I'm sure yours is the same as mine, there's no limit to how much time your work could suck out of you. I mean, I'm sure you do too. I have much more than 100% of my time dictated. But if I let that happen, and I let the stuff that's coming into my inbox, literally or figuratively, dictate how all of my time is spent, then I'll know there's no chance that I'll have that time for that sort of playful exploration. So I have to always keep a check on myself to say, I've had enough, and I'm going to go. So when I'm here, I hate to admit this, but when you and I were talking before, I was working on a robot. I was programming while we were talking. I'm sorry if it sounded like that, but you have to make small pockets of time where you're going to go do that exploration. You're going to go try doing something in your hand. You're going to learn another computer language. You're going to go learn about something. Oh, I've spent so much time learning about, how these antiviral these drugs work, right? Well, I'm not going to go out and make those drugs, but I find it fascinating. It's playful, it's fun for me. There is no because, but I have to. We all have to make, employees have to make their own time at that, and just sort of self-regulate. And I would say if you're in a leadership role, a management role, a professor role, et cetera, you have to have that same perspective. So in some ways, you have to kind of encourage that playful spirit, not just among for yourself, but of all the people who you're in charge of. And you probably need to spend some time thinking, talking to the employee, et cetera, to make sure that she or he is doing it in balance. If you're not doing enough of it, encourage them. But obviously, if they're only doing that and they're not getting their job done, it's sufficient to say that. But I think sometimes that requires a little bit of kind of looking the other way. If you're a manager, to sort of say, go out there, I encourage you to go out and have those things, and then come back and tell us what you learned. And to even embrace, if they come back and they say, that didn't go anywhere, that was a failure, well, even celebrate that in an appropriate way. What I don't think works, by the way, is mandating, we are going to have 7% more fun and you are going to use 12% of your work to do play. I think that it means something different to everyone, and it's not something that you need to do uniformly. I think it's the times that you're doing it the least are the times you should be doing it the most. So I think as a person of leadership, one is you need to demonstrate, you need to lead by example, to show that you have personal passion, that you're always learning. You mentioned curiosity. Curiosity is the huge driver of play. You have to act. Acting on curiosity is play, right?
Yep.
And you have to be able to demonstrate that yourself, and you have to be able to let the people who are in your charge do that. You have to encourage them to share that stuff, bring it back, even if it's not completely positive. And you have to help, make the overall balance inside your organization work out. But I think it's kind of a give and take. What I love about it is there's a certain mischievous component that you have to kind of, as an employee, try to see what you can get away with. And even as a manager, you have to see how much you can, of that time you can kind of let your charges do without you starting to get in trouble for your commitments. So it's kind of a fun, and even just that give and take is itself playful.
No, thank you for sharing a different perspective and giving a employee and the leadership. And as you probably touched a very good point, which I want to again highlight, the mandate of 7% or 10% may work, may not work, because again, you are mandating somebody to play. Because I have seen some of the companies say, hey, I give you 1 day or 1 hour in a day to play, because sometimes the play may not come on the designated day. It is up to the self-regulatory discipline one has to follow. One may say that, okay, out of 7 days, maybe whenever I may be playful Monday, it doesn't mean that every Monday I will be playful, because it is not a clockwise play. It is up to you how you want to do what you want to do. So thanks for clarifying and giving that information.
Actually, one thing I wanted to amplify, you picked that up exactly as I intended. I think you said it better than I did. One other thing, though, is this idea of celebrating play when it works, and whatever that that I'm very happy our culture at IBM, has given me a great platform for a lot of the stuff that I've done technically has come out of that sort of mischievous skunkworks kind of project, right? And I think if you're in a position in your company or your university to be able to celebrate the learnings of these playful projects of the people in your group, it's really sort of, you can't mandate that it's 7%, but you can show that as you as an individual, as a leader, and you organizationally value it by celebrating when it works, and even celebrating when it doesn't work. As we said before, sometimes failure is a very good, hard way, but a good way to learn about your own limitations.
That's true. That's true. So just picking on a little bit enhancement on this playful, I'm going to pick on one of your personal experiences. So I know you did participate in the Colony show.
Oh yeah.
And there are many different people have joined. So I want to know 2 things. One is how is your experience, and what is the outcome you were expected before going, and how it was after. And will that kind of a program is suitable to do some of these leaders in the industry to be part of those, so that we can create a better world and create this better place of bringing the innovation to the table and do something better, because everybody is so much so glued to their own business and working on, as we have seen so many things are happening and negative disruption. So I'm thinking, how can we learn from your experiences? Is there any advice to leaders if you can do some kind of those programs to any specific set of people to transform them?
Sure. And what I did, just for anyone who's listening, several years ago, um, and it was after our son's passing, I was looking for ways. Very pleased that IBM is very much values give back to the population, and I was doing a lot of work with STEM promotion, and I was at a stage where I was trying to figure out, well, how could I, you know, rather than dabble, how can I immerse myself in it for a short while? And literally, just I think we're very powerful at manifesting these things. I had this thought, and I literally went to my wife one day, and I remember, because I had a beer and it was snowing, and I said, what should I do? Should I go be an elementary school teacher? And she looked lovingly at me and said, I don't know, go ask the cosmos. So I really literally went outside and said, what do you have for me? And I got this invitation to go participate in a reality show on Discovery Channel for 2 months. And it was crazy. And while I think there are easier ways, I mean, depending on what you like doing, I mean, that involved, sitting around getting, physically beat up, eating rats and things like that. Might not be your cup of tea, but it was the best kind of energizing way of sort of throwing myself into a situation I didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, really flourishing. And it was all about innovation because it was on Discovery Channel. What was so interesting is coming back from that, whether people had seen the show or not, it was quite popular, but it didn't matter. It was a transformational experience, and the ability to work, to actually have fun and invent under duress couldn't be more germane than right now, right?
Yep.
And I think going back to the beginning of this conversation where we were talking about, how people were able to retool themselves, from going to, building wash machines to building ventilators. You don't necessarily have to go into a reality show and eat rats, but the idea of putting yourselves into a challenge, to challenge yourself to take a break, like 2 weeks, 2 months, to go do a service trip, to go dive into a course, to go do an outreach project in your community. There is nothing more invigorating than getting out of your shell. I mean, I am like many people who are engineers. I am kind of shy. It doesn't sound like I'm shy, but I'm shy. And this was a big leap. But if you have an opportunity to shake up what you're doing in somewhat of a safe way like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's so life affirming to put your foot into something completely new. And if I look back, like on my own career, that was an incredibly powerful step, because after having done one thing for almost 30 years, it taught me that I could move. I then came back into my own work in a very different mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm now on my fourth, I'd like to say successful career of taking what I already knew and then taking a step outside of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And, with that kind of playful, what's the worst that can happen? And it hasn't been easy, but like I've moved on from doing chips to Internet of Things to AI. And all of those have been sort of a logical step, but they all had that kind of walking into the wilderness kind of aspect. And I think that there are times in anyone's career where you're sort of wondering, what do I want to do? And sometimes doing an experience like that, going out of your comfort zone, at the very least, you'll come back invigorated. And you may discover a new path for yourself, or you may come back and discover that you're in exactly the right place, because no, I don't want to do that. But you don't, we so much live in our own little bubble, and sometimes we kind of get stagnant. So many times we talk of kids who have attention deficit disorder, ADD. I
Yep.
think we all kind of develop an intention deficit disorder, like IDD, where we forget what we want. We forget what we're doing and we end up just kind of going through the motions. And while that can be comfortable, it isn't exciting. And it's, I think that the sort of the way I would generalize what I did with the Discovery Channel is go challenge yourself. Go, take an opportunity like that. And if eating rats is what you're after, I would definitely suggest a reality show. But there are easier ways to do it. But get out of your comfort zone, move in another direction, and then use that as kind of a scientific experiment to see, what did I like of that? What did I learn from that? What did I like from what I was doing before? And use it as a tuning thing. And it's life gives you, maybe no one will come to you on a silver plate and say, here is a crazy experience like that. But you don't have to work very hard to find those things. Whatever turns you on, there's some sort of an immersive, um, slightly riskier kind of thing that you can do. So I really encourage that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, that's what I'm thinking. And I'm glad you are reaffirming what my thoughts are, because as a leader, we have been so much bogged down on day-to-day activities, but sometimes you have to take a break and do whether a community outreach program or something completely different from what you're doing, so that you can be more innovative. And then, as you rightly said, sometimes you gives you a reaffirmation that whatever you are doing is good, or whatever you are doing is not good. You have better potential to do better things. So
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
so I think in this whole thing, as you are saying, the concept of the innovation and the disruption, and as we all know, the AI is doing the entire disruption, and every company in 2020, because of these unprecedented times, if you are not reinventing or innovating yourself or redefining or transforming to a better version of you, then the company is not going to exist. So in your case, you have completely changed to the AI and the disruption. So would love to know what made you to come into AI, and what are you doing, and how, or what are the suggestions you are telling to the industries or the leaders where they have to adopt AI for a better experience? Is it a downside or a good side? Whatever your thoughts are on the
Oh,
AI and the disruption.
it's such an interesting thing, Swami, when I think of it, because one thing to put into perspective is, the AI boom right now, and I have to say it is a boom. I just started this week is my 40th year at IBM.
Wow, hearty congratulations. 4 decades in IBM.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I still like it. I don't know. That's crazy. But what was interesting about it is that when I was at MIT in the 70s, AI was hot then too. As a matter of fact, the father of AI, Marvin Minsky's son, was my suite mate, and so he was. So there was. It's really interesting to hear this perspective in the last 40 years that AI has had at least what are called, two AI winters, where the promise, it's like getting really big and then it didn't deliver and it disappeared. And it was interesting, it just kind of an interesting historical point, is that what has made it so big now is
Mhm.
kind of a coming together of several things. It's having the compute infrastructure, it's having the data, and it's having the software infrastructure. But the actual magic point, the match that struck, if you really would look back, is in the sort of 2012 era. People started using video game processors, graphics processors from video games, which were made entirely for play, by the way, to actually accelerate the simulations of these neural net kind of components. So, and we talk about AI, people use very broad language. I mean, there were a lot of numerical techniques that we now kind of classify as AI that were going around, but many of them, most of them, especially machine learning, supervised learning, has a high dependence on lots of vector math. Well, the same vector math is used to do a really good video game, so that when you're swinging a sword, it has the right feel, on the game show. So I think that's pretty ironic. And when people started using those graphics processors, started building up on top of it all these beautiful open source software platforms, it all of a sudden exploded. And it's in my 4 decades in this company, and 5.5 decades as a geek, as a nerd, or six decades as a nerd, I've never seen anything grow this fast, right? So I think your point is right, is that, it's one of these things where when a big technology comes out like that, there's this kind of, knee-jerk reaction. Well, I got to get some, I got to use it. But this really is transformational in that, so much of what we do in life is recognizing patterns and anticipating patterns and acting on them in a timely enough fashion. And as I'm an Internet of Things, hands-on kind of person, and so many systems, whether it's a car, a plane, a train, a dishwasher, a security system that can sort of make sense of real-time things, or better yet, predict the near future and act on it. I mean, there's so many possibilities on that. It isn't magic, it is just accelerating, for the most part, accelerating something that, humans are good at, but just not very fast at, recognizing, I'm doing, well, talk about projects later, but we do a lot of projects with, recognizing patterns in signals from IoT devices, like to determine whether a car is going to break down or something like that. But I think that what's so amazing is all the technical generosity that people have put into these open source platforms means that anyone coming out of a good technical college right now, even with a bachelor's degree, that she or he is able to take a problem and restate it and do the pattern recognition using all of these kind of open source tools. It's really fascinating. It's really magical. I do think that you mentioned the good or bad. I think like any technology like this, it's a tool. It's not good, it's not bad, it's a tool, and it's how we use it. And I do think that, while this is going to transform, you can just look at things like medicine. Look at these vaccines that we were just talking about. They were generated in large part by, they were using like the cryo-EM microscopy that I work on to recognize patterns in the biological systems. They used sequencing and to predict chemicals that would actually sequences that could be spliced into the mRNA, the mRNA sequences that go into these viruses. The AI pattern matching was just incredibly central to all of that, right? At the same time, AI can have a downside. You can look at the political unrest right now, and if you see a movie like The Social Dilemma or anything like that, have you seen that? You can realize that if unintentional consequences of bias in recommendations, right? Whether it's the media we get, or the music we listen to, or who should get a loan, or things like that. So there are these things that we have to be very careful as we relegate more decisions to machines. We have to make sure that they do the right thing. So to me, I mean, there's just so many applications that we're doing with clients on, that involve these kind of pattern recognitions, just to optimize business, optimize outcomes, reduce downtime, et cetera. I think that that part's clear. What I think we need to do is make sure that the technologists that are coming out have a clear view of the consequences and unintended consequences, so they can build things in, so they can figure out, is the AI that we're building fair? Is it making decisions based on that? Can it explain itself? So that if it makes a decision and I need to update, it's incorrect, I can at least understand the quote reason. They don't reason, but I can and make a correction. Is it safe? Is it secure? Is it ethical? All of those kind of things. And this has given me a lot of, some of the work that I do here in the state of Vermont. We're trying to figure out, how do we start getting an AI curriculum into our schools?
Oh.
There's no time, you can have that conversation about ethics and privacy with a kid. Every kid kind of grows up with one of these things,
Yep.
sucking on it as a baby, right? And to understand that the trade-offs you're making on your own privacy, et cetera, you can start having that conversation with a kid in elementary school. But over time, you can start explaining what the power of these tools are and what the potential dangers are. And I think that's the most important thing that we can sort of give to the next generation, is the curiosity about it, the hope of all it can do, and also the understanding of where it might fall short. Because they're going, whether they become, whether a child or a person decides to go into be an AI researcher or a data scientist, or just a user, it's going to transform everything. We're doing a lot of work on what we call the future of work.
Yeah.
Because this is so transformational, it's very interesting when you look at some of the data. There's some great work that MIT and has done with companies like IBM on the future of work. And it's very interesting. There's no doubt about the change in industry and science, in terms of people who want to apply data science to things like medical diagnosis. There's going to be great, career opportunity there. The interesting thing is, at the other end of the spectrum, so those are sort of, kind of intellectually driven jobs. The sort of manually driven jobs, craftsmen, people who, work with their hands, that's not likely to be, yes, there's automation and robotics, but that's not going to be affected. It's the vast majority of people in the middle doing service types jobs. It's going to be totally disrupted. And the only thing we can do is to start giving people the information they need about where those careers are going, like where's retail going, where is media going, et cetera, with the advent of AI, so that they can make informed choices either to what career they're going into, or even if you're mid-career, how you might want to re-educate and to avoid being, disrupted, to have your job go away. And I think if, again, it's very meta, but to use AI to predict those trends so that we can affect them, so that AI becomes more of a, that people are not disenfranchised by it. Because I think if we get ahead of it, there is, history shows us that more innovation leads to more jobs if you are able to do it right. If it comes at you and crashes over you like a wall, then you might get caught underneath. So I think it's very interesting. And to me, kind of bridging the playful part back in, is that the best way to start getting kids, or the general public, but mostly kids, involved in it, is to show the fun part of AI. AI can be really, really cool. And then you can start having the more serious conversations. So that's what I want to do in my next career.
No, that's good. I think thanks for sharing a different perspective of the AI and the good and the downside. But again, it is all about how you look at it. And you rightly said many people have to start learning and knowing about it. First of all, they need to acknowledge AI is going to come, and then you all need to know about it, either a user or be part of developer, or either side of the spectrum you should be there. And one funny thing you mentioned about the kid is, I'm a president of a nonprofit organization. And when I was talking to the kids, so I was talking about the AI to all of them and giving them some funny things. How can a refrigerator can order a milk by itself by looking at it, and then it can go to the grocery store and all, that gives them a lot of the curiosity. And then people said, oh, that means I was thinking to do something else. Now I want to do some AI when I go to college. So definitely we need to create that fun and curiosity. Then these people will come in and then they will learn, because the world is going to be disruptive, and people have to know about these technologies, whether you are going to be a developer, engineer or not, but the mindset have to be a scientific mindset. So thanks for bringing all this around the things.
Exactly right. Think about when electricity was invented. Certainly a lot of people went off to be engineers and craftspeople to do that, but it affected everyone, right? This is that kind of fundamental transformation.
Yeah, it's definitely a fundamental transformation, like electricity, the telecommunications, and this AI is completely disrupting. So you cannot ignore or avoid. You have to be with it. That means you need to know about it. So
And
thanks for
this is
sharing.
where this intention deficit, you have to know that you're going to direct yourself and not wait for it to happen to you.
Correct. Exactly. That's very true. And you are such a wonderful person and a wealth of knowledge. I can keep on and on and on for continuously, but just in the interest of the time, I would like to have a one closing remark from you. So what is the message you want to share to all other CXO leaders from the leadership perspective, with a scientific leadership in mind across the globe? What is that you would like to do, a takeaway from this?
What a great moment. Well, I think, as I said, I don't think there's ever been a moment certainly in my 6 decades, that I can remember where science was so much in focus and so on people's mind. And we can use that moment to really inspire. So I think to the leaders is, use this moment to inspire, not just about the achievements of science, but the process of science, which includes humility. right? It includes fallibility, it includes resilience, and it includes play. And I think that I would leave on that note is that what I would really like anyone who has that kind of, leader, that scientific leadership, engineering leadership, to make sure that you culture that passion and playfulness that brought you into it. You make sure the people around you are doing it, and then you witness to the world that this is something that is important, because I think passion is the thing that actually inspires other people to act. So this is just the best. There's never been a better time to be a nerd, and just you've got the perfect setup. So thank you very much, Kwame.
Yeah, no, thank you, John, for giving this, because based on the 2020, the unprecedented, so I have given my town hall meeting, and all the 1,000+ employees I manage. So I gave them a one word called PII. We always use in the security the personal data, but I have used this acronym as positive, inspire to innovate. But I think after this call, I have